raped on a bus in Delhi, sparking widespread outrage and protests, has died of her injuries. Doctors treating the 23-year-old medical student in Singapore said she had suffered organ failure. 6 people arrested for the attack are now likely to be charged with murder. The Indian Prime Minister Manmohan Singh has said he is deeply saddened by the death. He has vowed to take action to protect the women of India. Well, in Singapore, India's High Commissioner to the country, TCA Raghavan, has been speaking at a news conference.
The family too feels that while they have lost a daughter, but nevertheless, as the Prime Minister has said, that this is a step towards enhancing safety and security of women.
It was a horrific rape, and it drew an outraged response. The 23-year-old had been out to see a film with a male friend in Delhi, and the pair of them were returning by bus in the early evening when the attack happened. 6 men are believed to have been involved, and the young woman suffered severe injuries. Both she and her friend were thrown from the bus when the attack finished. She's not been named, but Indian media called her Amanat, an Urdu word meaning treasure. After 10 days in a Delhi hospital, she was transferred to Singapore for treatment, but she died there in the early hours of Saturday morning. In a statement, Dr. Kelvin Lowe said despite all efforts by a team of 8 specialists in Mount Elizabeth Hospital to keep her stable, her condition continued to deteriorate over these 2 days. She had suffered from severe organ failure following serious injuries to her body and brain. She was courageous in fighting for her life for so long against the odds. The rape on the 16th of December sparked outrage across India, with accusations that the police weren't pursuing rapists effectively and that the government wasn't doing enough to tackle the issue of sexual assault.
As a citizen of this country, I think all of us should have the right to be safe. That is what is my major demand.
Thousands of protesters took to the Indian capital streets over several days and were met by police using water cannon and tear gas. The authorities have responded to the anger, though. A series of measures have been introduced in Delhi, including banning tinted windows on buses and extra checks on bus drivers. Most rapes in India are thought to happen in rural areas, where women's lives can be very different to that of their city-living sisters. Many commentators say the issue is a cultural one about male attitudes to women, and that stronger laws are only part of the solution. John McManus, BBC News.
Now, Eve Ensler is an award-winning playwright and founder of V-Day, that is a global charity working to end violence against women and girls. Eve Ensler is on the line now from Kerala in southern India. Eve, let me just give a bit of background to our viewers about what you're doing in Kerala. You're there to promote the 1 Billion Rising movement, which is a day of mass action. It'll happen on Valentine's Day. Men and women will be demanding an end to violence. You're going to be talking, I understand, to college students in groups in Kerala. What are they saying to you, first of all, about this case?
Well, I haven't met with them yet, but I have met with, obviously, and talked to a lot of the activists we've been working with here on the ground. And I think everybody feels this is the tip of the iceberg. It's a hideous case. It's a horrible death. But there are so many horrible situations like this happening in India and throughout the world. I don't want to stigmatize India and make it particular. I've been traveling with the 1 Billion Rising campaign for the last year to many, many countries, and we're seeing essentially a rape typhoon across the planet of sexual violence, crimes of rape, culture of this kind of acceptance of the demeaning, degrading, raping, and brutalizing of women everywhere. And I think what people here are feeling is the time now. It's time now. It's time to rise up. It's time to demand an end. And a much bigger structural shift than just tinted windows on buses. It's a much more profound cultural reality, and it demands much more attention and much more will on the part of government.
You say it's a cultural reality, and that's really the key phrase, isn't it? Because it's about culture, it's about society. So in terms of the countries you've travelled to, have you been able to determine some sort of pattern about what sort of culture rape is more common in? Are we talking patriarchal cultures? Are we talking about macho cultures? In Latin America, for example, women's rights are very, very much bottom of the list of priorities.
Well, I have yet to be to a place, to be honest with you, that isn't a patriarchal culture. I'm waiting to land there. Let me know where it is. But I would say that I think the general sense that I see everywhere is that women are devalued, degraded, objectified, not seen as people who are um, equal or people who have worth. And I think when you're brought up as a boy in any culture to believe that women are not significant others, are not equals, are not real, then you treat them that way. That on top of the absolute poverty and just downward turn in economies across the planet has created a terrible mix of rage, of shame, of all kinds of emotional self-hatred that is being directed against women by governments, by the police, and by individual men.
Are you going to be travelling into the countryside, or are you sticking to cities? Because most of the protests we've seen, at least in the media in India, are restricted from what we've seen to the cities. And I'm wondering if it might be different in the countryside in India.
Well, I know that our activists are throughout the villages and are reaching out, and I'm really proud to say that 1 Billion Rising, and I want everybody who's listening to go to 1billionrising.org and sign on. It's a day of rising up and demanding an end through dance. 177 countries have signed up, and I'm talking about villages and small places throughout the planet. We're talking about unions and domestic workers and members of parliament and ministers and the Dalai Lama and Yoko Ono, and it is so widespread. And one of the things I hope is that this action will get people to understand that violence against women is a central issue. It's not a marginal issue. It's not an issue we get to later. If you're destroying the women of any given population, whether it's in Congo, where there is systematic devastating rape, or in India, where we're seeing case after case of women being annihilated and devastated, you are destroying the life and the future of that culture. And it's no different to climate change. I mean, if you destroy the body of women and the body of Earth, we will not be here. We will not go on. We will not prosper as human beings.
Eve Ensler, thanks very much for taking time to speak to us from Kerala. President Obama says he's still hopeful.